Welcome to Paint Radio with your hosts, Andrew Dwyer and Kevin Hoffman.
Heck yeah, let's do a podcast. It's Paint Radio, the APC podcast. We've got John MacFarland and Brad Ellison with us. We're going to introduce those guys in a minute, but I don't want to say more importantly. That would be rude to our guests. But very importantly, we've got Kevin Hoffman, our editor-in-chief. Kevin, how are you, sir?
I'm excited for this podcast.
We are always excited for a podcast. And here, look at this. This is Kevin's first issue as editor-in-chief, knocking it out of the park, setting the bar high right out of the gate. How was your first issue, Kevin? What was the experience like?
I couldn't have asked for a better first experience. I was lucky enough to attend PCA Expo, before the issue had to come out. And so I was able to meet a lot of great sources, a lot of great writers who were able to contribute their knowledge, two of whom were John and Bradley, who I saw on a great panel about this very topic, W-2 versus subcontractors. And I approached them afterwards and asked if they would be willing to write dueling columns for the first issue, and they generously agreed. And in fact, they actually were willing to have a little fun with it, squaring up on the cover like a UFC fight. So they indulged me on that, and ultimately they wrote columns that were really informative, some of the best that I've read on this topic. They are not just great paint company owners, but they are also literary scholars. So I was very impressed.
Wow, I can't introduce them any better than that. But let's make it official. We've got John MacFarland from MacFarland Painting in Livonia, Michigan. Am I pronouncing Livonia correct?
You are, yep.
Okay. And Brad Ellison of Ellison Painting in Oakland, Michigan. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be cover models?
Well, I'm sure it was John's first time. It was also my first time. That's exciting. This is one of the few magazines that I actually read cover to cover, partly because I know that I'll see some of my friends on some of the pages, but it is relevant info, and I was really happy to be included in that. So thanks, guys.
That's awesome. And yeah, like Kevin said, you guys did a great job on this topic at Expo, which, yes, let's put in a plug in. If you haven't been to Expo, man, you are missing out. And of course, if you didn't get this in your mailbox, what are you doing? Good Lord. I'm not here to call people out, but are you really even a painting contractor if you don't get APC? I don't think so. It's a free magazine, people. Come on, avail yourself of the resources and subscribe to APC. So it's one thing, as Kevin said, to be a committed, serious professional painting contractor, but you both, Kevin didn't just interview you, right? He just said, guys, you got to write something. So what was that experience like, John? Did you enjoy writing?
I did. I'll tell you, I had a problem necking it down to fit the magazine. Honestly, I just felt like I could go and go and go. And like Brad, we're passionate about what we do and like to tell our story. And that was my biggest problem, was trying to cut it back and not get down to every last nitty gritty detail. At that panel, we had a lot of time to talk, and I feel like condensing that was a little bit of a challenge.
Brad, are you comfortable writing?
I took the easy way out. I just subcontracted the writing to someone else. Just kidding.
Oh, my goodness.
Actually, I love writing. I think I'm a pretty eloquent speaker, but putting it down in writing allows you to really focus your thoughts and say exactly what you want to say. It was relatively easy to write because of the types of things that we're talking about every day anyway, right? Yeah. There's a conversation I've had with 100 different contractors and over 100 different forms of media. And so just writing it down was good. It was a good practice.
That's awesome. So yeah, we're talking about, employees versus subs. John, let's start with you. Tell us a bit about MacFarland Painting.
Sure. We service a similar market. You asked that kind of off the record. Brad and I probably only live 16, 17 miles apart as the crow flies. So we service an overlapping market. Our company does residential repaints predominantly, interior, exterior, and some carpentry aspects. We do commercial, but we're definitely an all W-2 business. We don't really even subcontract out ancillary services. We really just like to refer those out. So You know, my stance on the W-2 is kind of being the focal point of our family and our company, I think is what, for me, and Brad and I have gotten together since we wrote this too. For me, it's what kind of drives our culture in the direction that I like to have it. And we feel very strongly that having W-2 people in the building every day is a benefit to us.
Well, and apart from that, the topic of employees, tell us just about your company, the type of work you guys do, size, that type of thing.
Yeah. So we have right now 64 staff. We have 2 commercial estimators, 2 part-time estimators, and 4 full-time generalists that do the interior exterior residential side. We have a great front office staff and great people that have been with me for a long time. And then from there, our team runs basically five groups of project managers. And on their team, they have everywhere from 5 people up to 15 people right now. And those project managers are doing scheduling material orders, dodging the weather here in Michigan and moving things around and making sure that projects get started and finished on time. And that's what we do.
Nice. Brad, tell us about Ellison Painting. What type of work do you guys do?
So very similar to John, residential repaints primarily, just a little bit of commercial work when we stumble across it. Primarily exteriors. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I would guess about 75% of our revenue comes from exteriors. The other 25% comes from interior and cabinets. A little smaller than John's company for now. I mean, we're only 2 years old. We're on pace to do about $5 million in revenue this year using only subcontracted painters. But I do have employees. I have 3 full-time estimators. I have 2 full-time project managers and a third that we're about to hire. I have 2 full-time admins. So we're relatively well-staffed for a subcontractor model, I'd say.
Awesome. John, I want to start with you. You do an all-employee model, as you mentioned, W-2. You're a big booster of that. I think a lot of people would want to know, how are you able to make that happen? I think there's obviously some expenses associated with that. I think probably a lot of people would like to do it, but there's some challenges associated with it as well. So how were you able to go that route?
One of the biggest foundations for this, and this is not a secret, but we do pay our field staff a lump sum percentage of the job. So we're fixing that labor cost to some extent, but we're also building in a demand of efficiencies with them. So instead of just having somebody get paid hourly and seeing what's left at the end of the day for the owner and the operations aspect of it, we're capping that labor portion and then installing systems that drive efficiency. So paint being ordered in advance, shipped to the office here, highly detailed quotes with notes and pictures so that our field staff can get on the job sites and do what they do well, which is paint. We have a lot of stuff that happens on the back end before a project gets mobilized that allows that field staff to do what they're really good at. And I think for us, that's the culture that fits best with W-2s. I think in order to get the connectivity from the estimator to the field staff, they have to be in the same building. They have meetings together, they're crossing paths on a regular basis. And for me, I think that pay system definitely gives us a leg up in terms of instilling culture. If something's inaccurate on a quote or needs to be done differently, it really matters to that field staff. It's not, well, I can do a third coat. It doesn't matter to me. Let's just do it. They're going to go through a change order and have a very frank conversation with the customer and really handle it like it's their own company when they're out there in the field.
John, have you ever used subs?
Not for painting, for the ancillary services and things like that, some tile backsplashes. We do a good amount of cabinet refinishing, 6 or 8 a week. And so we tried that. It really just became cumbersome for us. We like to have the people in-house. And so our goal is to hire those things full time rather than sub that out.
So Brad, if you were nearing 5 million in revenue in your second year, I'm guessing you would not. I don't envision cumbersome being how you would describe many things in your business. That is remarkable. And I would also guess that from minute one, this was all part of the plan. I'm going to use subs. Mm-hmm. Talk a bit about, I'm sure you could go on for hours, but big picture, why are you thinking, okay, because you didn't just get started in painting 2 years ago. Right. You know painting, you know how to run a business. And when it was time to start Ellison Painting, you're like, sub's the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, I've acknowledged publicly that there are some pretty clear advantages to using W-2s, right? John talks about the internal culture, way easier to accomplish at MacFarland Painting with W-2s, for sure. You can certainly dictate where and when people need to be for work. That's an advantage that I don't have with subcontractors. The advantage that I have, and part of the reason why I chose to build a subcontractor model, is the ability to scale. Not only scale quickly during growth, but also to scale back when we don't have the work. What John has done in this climate, like this geographical and weather climate, is so impressive. And I don't want to inflate his ego anymore, because I've told him this time and time again. There it is. It's really impressive, right? I mean, I have to scale our production way back during the winter because there's just not as much work to go around when it's, negative 10 degrees outside. So for him to be able to keep 64 guys working nonstop is super impressive, and sounds very, very stressful to me. Now, I hope that I can get to the point where I can keep that many painters working during the winter, but I knew when I launched that was not going to be a possibility. So it allows me to, during the winter, I don't have to lay people off. Subcontractors know how that game is played. It allows me to use the best subcontractors when we have limited work available, so that we can continue to have a profitable and repeatable process even when things are slow. And the other thing is I'm not a painter, right? I'm infamously not a painter. I've never painted professionally. So when I launched my company, I couldn't have trained painters. I couldn't have taken the time to kind of find guys on the side of the road, teach them how to paint, and then build my company that way. I don't have that ability. I would have had to hire someone, like John or someone like Nick Slavic in order to come in and actually be the painter trainer. When you hire subcontractors, you don't have to do that. You're hiring guys that already have the tools, they already have the skills. What they probably don't have is the business acumen to run their own business, which is what I do have.
So if you talk about the ability to scale, and again, when you launched your business, you had a vision of what you wanted. It wasn't like, hey, I'm gonna try my hand at painting, because again, you had already been in the industry. But a big hurdle for a lot of contractors is growth. And one thing that stands in the way of growth is access to enough good employees. So did you come in from day one, Brad, already knowing this is what the market looks like? I already know my subs, and this is exactly who I want to sign?
No, because I had been running another company locally before this, and when I parted ways with my old partner, I consciously did not make any attempt to take any of our subcontractor crews with me, even though those crews were crews that I had recruited and worked for me. So I really started from scratch. And really, I started marketing, I started selling jobs, and it wasn't until I had about $50,000 worth of projects lined up that I had my first subcontractor crew, sign on with Ellison Painting and agreed to do some work for us. I just trusted that if I could sell the jobs and I was efficient and intentional about trying to find good subcontractors, that I would be able to meet the demand that my sales would provide.
Brad, I think you make some good points there. Certainly, it gives you that flexibility to scale and to cut expenses when you need to. John, that was kind of one of my questions to you: is how do you manage the expense associated with full-time employees? I mean, I think you're contributing to 401ks. I mean, I know you're looking at you're providing healthcare, which everything I've heard is that the costs of healthcare are really going up, and that's eating into employers. And so, the world in general is moving toward more of a subcontractor model. I mean, we've seen Uber and all of these different companies that are working with independent contractors and avoiding bringing on employees. So how are you able to make that model work, and what's the extra expense look like from your side of the table?
That's a good question. The expense is formidable. I mean, we have to save money and bank money in our season in Michigan. That's mid-April to mid-October generally, right, where we're working outside. And we can run at a zero margin or a negative margin, in part of quarter 4 and quarter 1 for sure. So you gotta pinch pennies and you gotta bank well. For me, balancing that becomes easier as time goes on. The more people you get, the easier it is to move pieces around, combine crews, take crews apart. If we go from 2 estimators to 3 estimators, it's a big increase in that volume. Going from 7 to 8 is negligible, that difference is. So that'll happen gradually, and for me, as much as it stresses me out to think about the expenses, and when I look at taxes, I am sick to my stomach, don't get me wrong. It's what I felt very strongly about was going to withstand the test of time, and that we're going to build something that is replicable and can go through a softer economy or a downswing or whatever and still come out whole. And I think we get and keep top-notch people, that are just with us because they want to be with us. And sometimes in the winter, their hours do shrink to 30 hours a week. We don't keep them always busy at 40. This last winter was a little rougher for a lot of us in the early part of the winter. November, December was oddly slow for me. And it's not easy to do that, but the people that come out of that in the spring, they're rearing at the bit, they're good to go. The short-term, long-term disability, the health insurance, the 401k, it allows us to attract the right people and allows us to keep them. And one of the biggest things I'm proud of is the amount of people in our building now that have had children in the last 2 or 3 years. It's over 10. So we're getting young families buying a house, buying a first house, buying a second house, having a second kid. And for me, that's who I would want in my home. And that's the people that I want to come into my building, come to work every day. And it goes hand in hand. Not that you can't do it the other way, but I feel strongly that I can do it my way.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Behr. Behr paint helps save time and money. From paint formulated to help you get great coverage, hide, and a smooth uniform finish, to free job site delivery, preferred pricing for pros, and the lowest price per gallon on Behr paint, guaranteed only at the Home Depot. Behr is committed to help you finish every job efficiently so you can move on to the next one. For more information, go to behr.com/pro. So Brad, I think it's easy to take the moral high ground when you have employees, right? You say, because I care, and man, contractors who just have subs, they don't care. And unfortunately, there are too many contractors who are doing it for all the wrong reasons. And that's why the Department of Labor is cracking down, because you're trying to skirt the laws, whether the letter of the law or the spirit of the law. You're doing it only to benefit yourself, the contractor. So, Brad, what do you say to that? What's the right way to use subs, or to employ subs? I shouldn't say use. Because if you're not contributing to their 401k, if you're not helping them with healthcare, a lot of these workers simply maybe don't have a retirement plan, maybe don't have healthcare. To what extent, if at all, should a contractor who employs subs care about that?
Well, first off, I want to say you shouldn't say use subs or employ subs. I like to say we partner.
That's right.
We partner
Exactly.
with subs. All right. So
Good.
There's a fallacy that you can save money by using subcontractors versus W-2s. It's not necessarily a fallacy, because there are certainly people that view it that way. It's like, how little can we pay a subcontractor crew so that we can increase our profit margins? Well, that's not how we operate. And I think that's played a big part of our success. We really do view our subcontractors as partners. They are largely guys who, well, they're almost exclusively guys who wouldn't come on board as employees. They don't want to be employees. They have some sort of pride, whether it's cultural or otherwise, in the fact that they own their own company. Now, you go to church and they own ABC Painting Company. They don't tell everyone at church that 80 to 90% of their revenue comes from one customer. That's Ellison Painting. But they still get to be employed. And one of the things that we focus on, rather than trying to pay our subs as little as possible, we say, how much can we pay our subs and still maintain the profit margins that we need in order to grow at the rate that we're growing? And so a lot of our subs are making way more money than they've ever made working on their own or working for other contractors. Now, I'm not paying for their health insurance, but I know that I'm writing the checks. I know how much we're paying them. I'm certainly paying them enough that they can afford to do whatever they want to do with their money. If they want to get health insurance, they get health insurance. If they want a 401k, they have the money to contribute to the 401k. They are business owners, just like me and John are business owners, and they have the freedom to do whatever they want with the money that we pay them. But we certainly pay them more than they would make as an employee. And I would say, I think it's really cool what John does with the, oh no, hold on.
That was not me, Brad. I promise.
No, John, what are you doing? I knew
John
this was
just
going to happen. My
turned off.
tweaking camera was, I thought it was charged fully. I'm going to switch over to my computer camera here. Hold on one second, guys.
Look at that. How many cameras do you have, Brad?
Well, now I'm just going to go right on my computer. The lighting's not going to be as good. The angle's worse.
No, you look great.
Ignore me.
That's
So-
impressive.
Yeah, so John, I think the way John does it with the performance-based pay is really, really clever, really creative way to incentivize W-2 workers, which I haven't heard anyone else really doing it that way. It's a really clever solution. But even so, if you factor in what he's paying plus benefits, it may not be as much as a lot of my subcontractors are making. So you have a little bit more stability and you have the benefits paid for, and you can promise and guarantee that money's going to a 401k. But grand scheme of things, it's possible that in a lot of these situations, John's paying less for his labor than I'm paying for mine.
John, it's kind of the elephant in the room. You heard both Andrew and Brad reference it, but there's some new rules going into effect regarding subcontractors. I know you're not a lawyer. Disclaimer here.
Right.
John is not providing any legal advice, but I thought in the column you did a good job of kind of laying out some of the hazards that might be there for the subcontractor model. So tell me a little bit about what owners have to look out for when classifying people as subcontractors versus employees.
Sure. So it's a 6-step process. California, maybe Delaware, 3 or 4 states have an ABC process to determine employees or subs. This is 6 steps. And the concerning thing about this for subcontractor models is if the primary function of your business is being subcontracted out, it doesn't meet the test. And so my concern, if I was Brad or anybody that is operating that, if you're subcontracting painting and you're a painting company, it's impossible to skirt that classification. You could probably subcontract plaster repair, glazing, pressure washing, or it's an ancillary service that you do as part of a project. And since it's only been, passed for 6 weeks now, the interpretation, Andrew brought that up earlier. I mean, how are they going to interpret this is scary. The penalty is capable of going back 3 years. If they feel like an employer knowingly skirted this and misclassified somebody, it's 3 years of FICA Medicare that they're going to get charged back at 15% and change. If you didn't know and you claim ignorance and they believe you, it's 2 years. There's no penalty to the employee. It's only the employer. And my concern, if I was on the other side of the tiles here, would be, I don't know that I have 15% of what I've paid people the last couple of years, especially at Brad's rate of growth, just sitting in an account ready to write a check to the IRS with taxes and fees. So it's scary to me. I think before it was always a little gray, but that language of if it's a primary service that the business offers, they cannot be classified as subs. That's new language. And what most people that are attorneys have started to write articles on is that's kind of scary. And it seems like that's where the focus of the law is going to be different, because it's the only language that is wildly different than what's been in place before.
Mhm.
And again, how are they going to employ the staff to, go and find those people, and how are they going to do that? We don't know yet. But there are 20,000 agents being hired. This has been a big push of this Biden administration. And I started doing my taxes legitimate about 12 or 13 years ago, because I didn't want the, bar tab, dinner tab with my friends going through my stuff. It was just easier to do this above board. And if I get audited, say, here you go, good luck. And I think that's one of the biggest stressors about small business owners is the tax implications and the unknown, because you can't be an expert at this. And most CPAs are not schooled enough to be expert when tax law changes. And so I felt like certainly it's a safer route to maintain where I'm at right now. And it's even safer now than it was, 3 months ago, I think.
Yeah, Brad. So, I mean, you're really in the thick of it with this. This is something that would affect you more. And as John points out, there's a lot of unknowns that we're waiting to figure out. And so how do you stay on the right side of this law, and how much of it is a concern as a business owner? What John was saying in terms of, those penalties. I don't think any business owner is able to just pull that pocket money out. So what are you doing to avoid that? And how much is it on your mind that, they still might, we don't know yet, but they might crack down on everybody?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think about it too much. Sounds like John understands and has read a lot more than I have. I am operating my business with integrity and following the letter of the law as I understand it. But I'm also willing to pivot. And if they come down and say, hey, you cannot operate with subcontractors in this painting business anymore, you have to move to employees, then we'll make that pivot. And at that point, I bet most of my subcontractors would have a different tune about whether they want to be employees or not. Because either have work and have consistent pay, or have none. And I'd have to make a dramatic shift in my business. I could always just ask my friend John if he's got any money to borrow for my fees. Fine.
I spent it on healthcare, Brad. I'm sorry, I don't got it.
Yeah, I don't. Whatever. The tides change on this type of thing all the time. John mentioned it's a big push from the Biden administration. Well, there's a decent chance that the Biden administration is not going to be in office after this, and the next administration may have a different push, different take on it. What I can control are how I'm running my business right now, and that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to continue to grow in the same way we're growing, and make changes if I have to when I have to make them.
You mentioned calling them partners. That seemed like a very deliberate choice of words. Is there some things like that you do to specifically stay out of that harm's way? Like, for example, maybe they're not wearing Ellison painting shirts on the job. I mean, is there some little tricks that you may be able to give to business owners on how to appropriately use subcontractors?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to keep correcting your guys' language. I wouldn't call them tricks. There are things that we do. I don't use the word partner as like some clever way to disguise what we're doing. I really do view them as partners. We operate. Our subcontractors have they signed a subcontractor master agreement that my attorney wrote up. That just says, we're going to operate as gentlemen, and if you accept this job, you have now obligated to do it, and I'm obligated to pay you for the work that you complete, and I'm going to pay you whether I get paid by the customer or not. Just kind of outlines that type of thing. We are not allowed to require our crews to wear Ellison painting shirts. We provide those shirts, and if they are willing to wear them, we are very grateful of that. But we have full-time project managers, and they really are overseeing the work. They're putting up lawn signs, they're collecting checks, they're running Ellison painting, and the subcontractors are providing the labor. So I don't know if there's tips or tricks. I mean, we make sure that all of our subs have the proper insurance certification. So general liability, workers' comp, we have their W-9, we log every payment, we pay them full, we don't pay them in cash. So there's a record of all of that. I don't think there's any tricks to it. It's like, just, hey, operate like you're supposed to operate and treat these guys the way you're supposed to treat them legally, which, again, part of this conversation is what is legal and what is not at this point. I don't know, but we're operating the right way as it's been operated in Michigan for years.
No, I think that, yes, correct our language anytime. And I think that is because they are tips, not tricks. And I think anyone who is serious about what they do, whether you're a professional painting contractor or an editor-in-chief, words matter, language matters. And so you're very specific about what you do. And you also want to be specific when you choose the words to describe what you do. Brad, you've talked about how the use of subs allows you flexibility to scale. But I think a lot of contractors would be concerned of the exact opposite. So do you think, again, I love, you're strategic minded, you're very organized. Does it require a higher level of strategery to invoke subs as opposed to employees? Because I think some contractors are scared by that I don't have control over the subs.
I think it requires more sophisticated systems and management. You can grow in a W-2 model slowly and steadily. And, John's company, whatever, 13, $14 million in revenue, that's huge, but that's after 20, how many years you been in business, John?
Yeah, about 20.
Okay. So first 7 months, we did $1 million. The second year we did 3 million. The third year we're on pace to do 5 million. It's much harder to do with W-2s. Now, the only way that you can do that using subcontractors and not have everything fall apart is to have sophisticated systems. So we have SOPs internally through which we operate for estimating, for project management. Our estimates are very detailed as far as what's expected for the scope of work, so that when a subcontractor accepts it, they're accepting that they're going to follow those steps as well, right? Now, we're not going to dictate we can't dictate what time they show up, what hours they work, but in general, they're going to show up when we need them to show up, and they're going to work when we need them to work, because that's that's based on our subcontractor agreement. Once they accept a proposal, they're willing to follow those procedures. So it can be much more difficult to scale. It can become more unstable the more subcontractors you add. But if you preemptively hire the support roles like we do, the estimating and the project management and the schedulers, we're usually overstaffed compared to where we are right now, so that we can manage properly when we hit the level that we know we're going to hit. Right. So right now my company's staffed to be a $5 million company, but we actually technically haven't sold enough to justify it. So we're building the system so that we can manage that scale.
John, a similar kind of question. So when you're hiring employees, in some ways that's a greater commitment than just bringing in a sub. We've all heard that hiring is really tough right now. And so what's that like for you? Has it been more challenging to find good workers? And is there a greater burden on you as the hiring manager to vet them, because you're making a longer term commitment and it's harder to get out of it?
Well, I mean, I think it's getting easier. It's flipped to an employer market maybe 7, 8, 10 months ago. It was coming out of COVID. It was difficult. We got stiffed on a lot of interviews. We had a lot of people who were going to be there and then weren't. I think that's changed. We've been pretty blessed, just like Brad. So if you look at the dichotomy of good guys out there running their own painting company, let's say that everyone's good. It's not the case, but we're dealing with 10 guys that are all good. There may be 4 or 5 that want to remain a business owner and be a subcontractor. There's also 4 or 5 that are sick of evening estimates, typing on the weekends, doing the runaround, and they don't want it. They just don't want to deal with that stress anymore. We've had really good success getting those guys to come on board as full-time employees. And right now I probably have 12 or 13 in the building, 2 with builders licenses, that just want the systems like Brad does provide, but don't even want to still be that into owning their own business, kind of in filling in the gaps of the work. And they said, you know what, I don't care about the name on the truck that much. I want in on this team. We just had a guy start a couple weeks ago, and his, explanation was, it's kind of like joining the Patriots. I can fit in here. I can do what I do really, really well. I don't have to wear all these hats anymore, and I'm going to sleep at night. And so just like Brad gets great subs, I think we get great guys that maybe didn't want to be business owners. Maybe they're not as proud about it at church. It's just something that they kind of did, or felt like they had to do, or fell into, or were like all of us at one time, we're great technicians. And then now we got to run a business and we got to figure out how to do that, where they're not interested in that buy-in. And so right now I'd say we're doing pretty well. I mean, still younger folks are tough. Younger people, summer jobs. I'm amazed that we can't get more folks for a summer job still. It's been about 6 or 8 years, since that was a really easy thing to do. Our tagline is, free suntan and learn skills and be active and all these other things. And it's just a difficult market with real young people to want to work with their hands and work outside, even though painting is one of the easiest physical trades there is, and something that's a skill you can have for the rest of your life at your own home. But that's a tough one still. But the general populace, 25 to 45-year-old field staff, those people are pretty readily available right now.
And the flip side of that, Brad, if you don't mind, is there can be a stigma among customers with using subcontractors. And so I was You did a great job in your column of kind of pushing back against some of the kind of common criticisms of a subcontractor model. So how, does it come up with customers? How do you talk to the customers about that? Does it pose any additional challenges from an optics perspective?
It comes up every once in a while. And it's because they're, oh, my dad told me to ask whether you guys have employees or subs. And the reason people ask, of course, is because people have had nightmare situations where they hire a company and that company just finds some other random company to come and do the work and leave. So I always acknowledge that. I'm like, can I ask what the nature of the question is? Why does that matter? And then they explain why. And I say, I totally get it. This is why I built my company the way I did. We use subcontractors, but these guys have been painting forever. Most of them work primarily with us and have been for a while. But also we have full-time project managers. They're going to be here to kick the job off. They're going to be doing job site visits, and they're going to be here for the final walk around. And oh, by the way, we're not going to charge and send you the final invoice until you've signed off that you're happy and the work is done well.
And to that point, I think that's where most people with Brad's model fail. They try to give someone a work order and then expect it to just go well.
Yeah.
That his process with that, I think, is second to none of seeing it through for Ellison painting. And
well, the reviews will justify it. I mean, I say, if you look at our reviews, we are the #1 rated painting company in Michigan over the past 2 years. If you base it on our ranking and the number of reviews we've got, and that's not a crack on John. John's much bigger than we are, but we are providing this level of customer service that people have never experienced in the painting industry, unless maybe they've hired John's company, right? But those that haven't, it's totally foreign to them, and we're doing that at such a high level. I do want to mention real quick. So I hear that finding good labor is hard. You may have accidentally stumbled across the 2 painting company owners that are not having that issue, or the old adage is true that good people attract good people. And so, John, I love that point you made, that I'm finding the guys that want to keep owning their own business, and you're finding the guys that did own their own business and want out. And those 2 groups of people are finding the right home. Yeah. And I have no shortage of subcontractors that want to work with us. The word is out now that when people sub for us, they get paid well, they get paid on time. We make their lives easy. We make their lives profitable. And so I don't know that anyone in Metro Detroit would want to go, oh, look at that dog.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Would want to go subcontract for anyone else. And on the flip side of that, anyone that wants to be an employee, I can't imagine they'd want to go work anywhere besides MacFarland. So good people are attracting good people.
That's a great point. There's obviously merits to both models. As we're kind of heading into the home stretch here, I was hoping that each of you could kind of offer some wisdom and advice to some of the painting contractors who may be listening and deciding which of these 2 models to pursue and what are the best practices for each of them. John, let's start with you. What would you tell a paint contractor that is looking to go with employees and follow your lead?
I think the biggest hurdle is for them to develop systems that make the model work. If they expect just to put people in and have this be profitable, there are going to be the folks that say, I can't afford healthcare. I can't afford a 401k match. I can't afford short-term, long-term disability. We've had more people go off of short-term, long-term disability than we've had on work comp times 10. Broken ankle, skateboarding, softball accident, fishing, foot infection, throat cancer scare. Those people got 2/3 of their income when they're off. All right, car accident off the clock. So those freak things that happen, those people don't lose their house. So I think if you're serious about doing this for the long time with the W-2 model, you have to design systems that run efficient so that you can afford it, because raising your prices won't do it. If you don't have rules and regulations in play internally, you're going to gobble up every bit of free money, and you're going to be the 25-year-old John taking his buddies out and buying drinks because I got this amount of money in my bank account and so I can spend it. Your goal is to put the systems in that make this replicable so that you can provide those things. And if you say you can't, you're probably being too lazy. You just need to focus on where to put your efforts and try to fix some of the waste. I instruct people that are new hires here, if you get out of your truck at Home Depot or Sherwin or PPG, take $60 out of your own pocket, tear it in half, leave it in the parking lot, and tell me how many times you want to do that. We get deliveries every day here. Why are we going to the stores on any regular basis? It shouldn't be part of an understood, well, I get up and I go to the store, I wait in line, I get my materials, I go to the job. That's time that they could have painted a ceiling or 4 doors or whatever they're capable of doing. And I think that's the stigma. They have to rework their own mental thing and say, okay, your job now is to build something that's efficient so that you can then provide these. And you can't do it all at once. I would actually start with short-term, long-term disability first, because in our business, we're employing young, active people generally, and things happen. These guys play basketball and soccer and rec league, different sports and all these things. And that's a really, really cheap option. That's 10, 15 bucks per paycheck. You can't tell me you can't afford that to start. And then you can build the other stuff as you get even more efficient. You certainly need to have some structure to provide those things. I'm not saying you don't, but I purchased all of them when it was probably very difficult for me to do so when we implemented them. And it kind of forced me to be a better steward of money. Just like buying my first house, buying my first new car, it was uncomfortable for a period of time. I had to watch what I was doing, and I got very comfortable and better with it, and then moved on it up. It's the same process professionally.
Good points. And Brad, the flip side of that, what would be your pitch to painting contractors who are thinking about going the submodel and want to scale as rapidly as you have?
So if you think about doing a subcontractor model, it makes sense if you are willing to get off the brush right away and actually manage the business. If you like painting, if you want to be on site, absolutely just bring on some W-2 painters, be there, train them, teach them your systems, and you can start growing from there. Guys that want to run a business and not paint and want to get off that brush ASAP, that's subcontractor model is going to get you there a little more quickly. The tips I would say would be take risks, be willing to spend money on marketing. You got to sell the jobs in order to attract the subcontractors to sell the amount of jobs and generate the amount of revenue that you need to stay off the brush and continue to grow. So you got to take risks. I would say you have to live open-handedly. I've already talked about this during this podcast. You cannot be stingy with the amount of money that's coming in. You have to share in the rewards. And Ellison Painting could be a lot more profitable on paper if we were willing to cut back on our project management, if we were to pay our guys less, but the service we provide would be worse. Our availability then to grow based on our reputation would be weakened, and we'd choose to live open-handedly. And then the last thing would simply be, be a person of integrity. Do the things that you say you're going to do. Every subcontractor has been burned by another contractor at some point. And when people come in for an interview, I tell them we're different, but they don't know that I'm any different until they actually give us a shot. So we make sure, and we're very intentional from that very first interaction through the very first few jobs, and then ongoing in our relationship, that we will do everything that Ellison Painting says we are going to do. And then we have loyalty, and they value the partnership. They scratch our back, we scratch theirs, and we can all grow and benefit together.
The one thing I want to remind listeners is that John and Brad are competitors, which is like in the same market. And
Fierce competitors.
And what I love about that is you guys are such great role models of what it means to be a professional painting contractor. I think, and if you're watching this, listening to this, and you don't have a good relationship with at least one competitor in your market, fix that. Get out there, network, meet one of your competitors. Sure, there's some bad ones out there that you don't want to be friends with, but man, you can learn so much from a kindred spirit. That's why APC exists, to help painting contractors get better. But man, you can do it right there in your own town. How did you guys first meet?
So I think I reached out to John. So I had been interviewed on Brandon Pierpont's podcast, a couple of years ago. This was even before I even started Ellison Painting, the first time I was interviewed by him. And then I saw he had posted a podcast, and it said, John MacFarland Painting, something about his astronomical revenue numbers. I'm like, man, I got to listen to that. And then at the beginning, he says he's based in Livonia, Michigan. And like John said, that's like 16 miles from my house. And I've never even heard of the guy. So John has kept a pretty low profile personally. His company obviously is big, but I didn't know that he was local. And so I just reached out to him at that point. I was like, hey, I'd love to connect. I think it took him a long time to respond. But now I've sucked him into the PCA, and he's been helping to lead the gathering of Michigan Painters group. He actually hosted the last one at his shop, which is a very, very modest 44,000 square foot facility. Like, no big deal. No big deal. It's like a mall. He owns a shopping mall, is what he
Right.
is.
Hey,
Yeah.
malls are out. Big paint companies are in.
Yeah. And no, John, as much as I dislike John personally, I really respect him professionally. That's a joke, by the way. I really like John. We've hit it off, and it's fun to have a little bit of an adversarial relationship. But I go into estimates. I'm still in my business a little bit doing estimates. I know, John, you don't do any estimates anymore, right?
I don't usually know.
But I really like going in and I see a MacFarland painting folder on the countertop. And I say, oh, you've had MacFarland out. How was that experience? And they say, oh, it was great. And I said, you know what? The owner of that company, John's a friend of mine. They're a phenomenal company. I think we're a little better. But if you end up hiring them, you are absolutely going to be happy. Hire one of us, you're going to be happy. And that's the type of relationship that we have with a lot of painters here locally, right, John? I mean, there's a lot of really good, high integrity painters in Michigan.
A ton. And I think, the issue isn't Brad. It's not John. If we lose a job to each other, that's fine. I don't want to lose the job to the one guy in a truck who steals the deposit and burns some lady who that's all the money she had out of her Social Security or whatever. So there's a lot of work to go around this area. And as long as the good people are getting it, we're cool to lose a bid or a project to somebody like Brad. And there's Steve. I mean, there's a lot of good guys in this area that are active and really high quality people that we've referred some, but we think there might be a better fit. I'm fine giving that up. And that's not easy because we're competitive. And don't get me wrong, Brad and I, there's a competitive nature of this. I don't want him getting too close to me and he wants to overtake me. And we're both well aware of that relationship and it keeps it fun,
So that made me think one other thing, if I can bring it up. So when we talk about culture, John has an advantage there managing cultural internally. I think someone with my business model actually has a different opportunity to affect the culture at an industry-wide level. It's going to be easier for me to scale quickly, start other locations, and kind of duplicate my model in other geographical or major metropolitan areas. That's something that John is also kind of partnering with me now too at the local level, is elevating the industry locally. I think I do have an advantage with my model, reaching a wider industry-wide, making them a wider industry cultural influence. Do you agree, John, or do you disagree?
I think you're definitely active, and people respect you an awful lot. I think that your model, because it's not quite so tightly held and your field staff are subs, I think allows you probably to feel easier to give up information and to be accessible to people. And Brad's been doing that for, out in the field longer than I have. And I appreciate him bringing me along. And, doing that panel with him in Florida was just a lot of fun. That was my first expo. And, like he said, it's not that I'm an introvert, but I just am not out there on social media. So I kind of was a nobody. And, he did a very nice job of bringing me along and showing me a good time.
So again, I'll repeat it. If you're not having conversations like this with one or more of your competitors, fix it, change it, go out there, meet a kindred spirit. They're out there. They can really help your business. Look at them. You've got the fists up on the cover, but you know what we could have done, Kevin? On the back, we could have had them hugging.
Right.
But fortunately, Graco decided to buy a back cover ad, which we actually like more. So
I don't know if they would have gone along with the hug.
I can't get my arms around that guy. We are not in the same weight class. We would not be fighting.
Oh, man. John MacFarland Painting in Livonia, Michigan, and Brad Ellison of Ellison Painting in not that far away Oakland, Michigan. You guys are awesome. Thanks for putting pen to paper and contributing to the magazine. Thanks for coming on to the podcast and modeling such wonderful professional painting behavior, guys. Excellent job on the podcast.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate you guys too.
Thank you. And Kevin, man, well done. Your first issue of APC. Seriously, if you don't get the magazine, what are you doing? It's free. Go to paintmag.com, sign up. You'll get it 9 times a year. You can get the e-newsletter, the website. There's a ton of information. The podcast, you get exposed to people like this. It's tremendous. There's even a I think, a one-page additional feature, Kevin, about from an attorney, Carolyn Crow means, talking about the specifics of the letter and the spirit of the law, correct?
Yeah, and she is an attorney. You'll
right.
still want to talk to your own, but yeah, she can really dive into the legalese when it comes to how to classify subcontractors and how to make sure you're staying on the right side there.
There you go. It's all waiting for you at paintmag.com. That's why we're here, trying to bring together kindred spirits in the painting industry. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Paint Radio.